The handshake lasted 3 seconds longer than it should have. 3 seconds. That was all it took to change everything. When Olivia Harper excitedly pulled her best friend into the grand living room and introduced her to her father, she expected an ordinary afternoon. She expected polite greetings, casual conversation, and another pleasant visit between two people she cared about. What she did not expect was the strange silence that followed. The moment Madison Reed extended her hand, Olivia's father reached for it. Their eyes met. Neither looked away. For a brief moment, the room felt unusually quiet. Madison smiled first. Olivia's father smiled back. And somehow neither seemed aware that they were still holding hands. "Dad?" Olivia finally said with an awkward laugh. The spell broke immediately. Madison pulled her hand back. Olivia's father cleared his throat, and the conversation moved on, at least on the surface. Because years later, when everyone involved looked back on that afternoon, they would all point to the exact same moment. The handshake, the look, the silence, the beginning. She spent 2 years trying to convince her father to fall in love again. 2 years introducing him to successful women. 2 years arranging dinners. 2 years listening to him reject every possibility. Every conversation ended the same way. Every suggestion received the same response. I already had the love of my life. No matter who Olivia introduced, no matter how kind, beautiful, educated, or accomplished the woman was. Her father never showed interest, never curiosity, never excitement, nothing. He was a man who had buried his heart alongside his wife. At least that was what everyone believed, including Olivia herself. Engage in our comment section and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, whether you're in Georgia, Moscow, Ohio, California, New York, Mexico City, Tokyo. Drop your location below. And if you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our new videos. What makes this story remarkable is not simply the relationship that eventually developed. It is how impossible it seemed in the beginning. Olivia's father, Benjamin Harper, was one of the most respected businessmen in the state. At 52 years old, he had built an empire through discipline, intelligence, and relentless hard work. Employees admired him. Competitors feared him. Friends respected him. But after losing his wife 8 years earlier, something inside him changed. He still smiled. He still attended meetings. He still showed up for his daughter. Yet there was a distance in him that nobody could reach. People often assumed time would heal his grief. It never did. Years passed. The loneliness remained. Olivia hated seeing it. She watched him come home every evening to an empty house. She watched him spend holidays pretending he was fine. She watched him sit alone during celebrations, while everyone else was surrounded by family. And more than anything, she wanted him to be happy again. The problem was that Benjamin had absolutely no interest in finding someone new. At least until he met Madison. Madison Reed had been Olivia's closest friend since college. The two women were almost inseparable. They shared birthdays, vacations, weekend trips, career advice, heartbreaks, successes. Whenever one was struggling, the other was there. Their friendship had survived years of life's changes, which was exactly why Olivia trusted Madison completely. Madison was 27 years old, bright, ambitious, confident. She worked as an interior designer and had recently started her own company. Unlike many people who were intimidated by wealthy or influential individuals, Madison treated everyone exactly the same. Whether she was speaking to a receptionist or a CEO, her attitude never changed. People noticed that about her. Benjamin noticed it too. The first visit should have been forgettable, a simple introduction, nothing more. But after Madison, left that afternoon, something unusual happened. Benjamin found himself standing near the front window, watching her walk toward her car, watching her open the driver's door, watching her leave, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he remained there long after she had disappeared from view. He told himself it meant nothing, a harmless observation, nothing unusual. Yet later that evening, while reviewing business reports, he caught himself thinking about her smile. The next morning, he remembered the sound of her laugh. By the following week, he remembered details he should not have remembered. The color of her dress, the way she spoke, the confidence in her voice, the warmth in her eyes. That realization disturbed him, because Benjamin Harper had spent years avoiding emotional attachments, years convincing himself that chapter of his life was over, and now a woman he barely knew occupied his thoughts, a woman who happened to be his daughter's best friend. Meanwhile, Madison was experiencing her own confusion. The day after visiting Olivia's house, she found herself replaying conversations she normally would have forgotten. Benjamin's questions, Benjamin's smile, Benjamin's calm presence. At first she laughed at herself. It was ridiculous, completely ridiculous. She had met older men before, successful men before, interesting men before. So why was this different? Why was she still thinking about him? Why did she remember every detail of their brief interaction? And why, more importantly, was she suddenly looking forward to seeing Olivia again? The answer was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. A week later, Olivia invited Madison over for lunch. Madison accepted immediately, too quickly. Even she noticed it. And when she arrived at the Harper estate that afternoon, she discovered something unexpected. Olivia was running late. She would not be home for another hour, meaning there was only one person waiting inside: Benjamin. The moment Madison stepped through the front door and saw him standing in the foyer, something shifted between them. Neither understood it, neither wanted to acknowledge it, but neither could deny it either. And as they sat together making harmless conversation while waiting for Olivia to arrive, both of them began realizing the same dangerous truth. This was no longer a simple attraction, and if they weren't careful, someone was eventually going to notice. What neither of them knew was that the first person who would notice was Olivia herself, and when that moment arrived, it would change all three of their lives forever. For the next several weeks, nothing happened. At least that was what everyone believed. There were no secret messages, no late-night phone calls, no dramatic confessions, no forbidden meetings. If anyone had been watching from the outside, they would have seen nothing more than a successful businessman, occasionally sharing conversations with his daughter's closest friend. Everything appeared innocent, normal, respectable. And yet, beneath those ordinary interactions, something was changing. Something neither Benjamin Harper nor Madison Reed seemed capable of stopping. The problem was not that they were trying to get closer. The problem was that they were not trying at all. It simply kept happening. Whenever Madison visited Olivia, Benjamin somehow appeared. Whenever Benjamin planned to spend the afternoon away from home, circumstances often brought him back earlier than expected. At first, they both dismissed it as coincidence. Then coincidence began happening too often. One afternoon, Olivia invited Madison over to help organize decorations for a charity fundraiser she was hosting. The two women spent nearly an hour discussing ideas before Olivia suddenly received an urgent call from work. She apologized repeatedly, promised she would return quickly, and left Madison alone in the house. Madison considered leaving. She probably should have. Instead, she remained. A decision that would stay in her memory for a very long time. Benjamin was in his study, reviewing documents, When he discovered Madison was still there, he expected an awkward conversation. Perhaps a few minutes of small talk. Nothing more. Instead, they spent nearly 2 hours talking about books, travel, family, dreams, regrets. The conversation flowed so naturally that neither noticed how much time had passed. For years, Benjamin had become accustomed to superficial discussions. People spoke to him differently because of his status. Employees were careful around him. Business associates measured every word. Even friends sometimes seemed intimidated. Madison wasn't. She challenged his opinions, questioned his assumptions, disagreed with him when she thought he was wrong. And strangely enough, Benjamin found himself enjoying it. More than enjoying it, looking forward to it. When Olivia finally returned home, she immediately noticed something unusual. Her father was laughing, actually laughing. Not the polite smile he often used in public, not the brief chuckle he offered during social events. A genuine laugh, the kind she had not heard in years. For a moment, she simply stood there watching. Then she smiled, because seeing her father happy felt like a gift. What Olivia did not realize was that she had just witnessed the beginning of something much bigger. As the weeks continued, Madison became a frequent visitor at the Harper estate. Officially, she came to see Olivia. Unofficially, she found herself hoping Benjamin would be there. Sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't. But on the days he was absent, she noticed a strange disappointment settling inside her. The realization troubled her. It troubled Benjamin, too. Neither wanted to examine those feelings too closely. But both knew the situation was complicated. Benjamin was Olivia's father. Madison was Olivia's best friend. That fact alone should have been enough to keep boundaries firmly in place. Yet, emotions rarely follow rules, and attraction rarely asks permission. One Saturday afternoon, Olivia invited Madison to spend the day by the pool. The weather was beautiful. The atmosphere relaxed. Everything felt normal, until Olivia received another call requiring her attention. She disappeared inside the house. Madison remained outside, alone, or so she thought. A few minutes later, Benjamin stepped onto the terrace carrying a glass of iced tea. Their eyes met instantly. Neither spoke. For reasons neither could explain, these quiet moments were becoming increasingly significant. Benjamin sat nearby, not too close, not too far, just enough to continue a conversation. The discussion began innocently. Current projects, upcoming events, future plans. Then somehow shifted toward personal subjects. Madison spoke about the pressure of building a successful business. Benjamin shared stories about mistakes he had made while creating his company. The more they talked, the more comfortable they became. And comfort was becoming dangerous. Because comfort creates trust. Trust creates connection. And connection creates feelings that are difficult to ignore. Later that evening, Madison drove home, unable to stop thinking about the conversation. She replayed every moment repeatedly, every smile, every glance, every word. By the time she reached her apartment, she could no longer deny the truth. She was developing feelings for Benjamin Harper. The realization terrified her. Not because he was unkind, not because he was unavailable, but because of Olivia. Olivia trusted her. Olivia considered her family. How could she possibly explain feelings for her best friend's father? The answer was simple. She couldn't, at least not yet, so she decided the smartest solution was distance. A little space, a little time, enough to let the feelings fade naturally. For 2 weeks, Madison barely visited. She answered Olivia's messages. She remained friendly. But she deliberately stayed away from the Harper estate. At first, the plan seemed successful. Then Benjamin noticed. He noticed because he found himself looking toward the front entrance whenever he heard a car arrive. He noticed because Olivia kept mentioning Madison's name. He noticed because the house felt strangely quieter. Most importantly, he noticed because he missed her. The realization struck him unexpectedly during a business meeting. Someone asked a question. Benjamin started answering, then suddenly realized his thoughts were somewhere else entirely, with Madison. That frightened him more than he cared to admit, because missing someone meant emotional attachment, and emotional attachment was precisely what he had spent years avoiding. Yet the feeling refused to disappear. Days passed, then more days. The distance that Madison hoped would weaken their connection only seemed to strengthen it, and eventually fate intervened. One evening, Olivia organized a small dinner gathering at the house. Nothing formal, just a few friends enjoying a relaxed evening together. Madison almost declined. Almost. But after several messages from Olivia insisting she attend, she finally agreed. The moment she arrived, Benjamin saw her, and the reaction surprised even him. Relief. Genuine relief. The kind people feel when they find something they thought they might lose. Across the room, Madison experienced the same feeling, the same comfort, the same happiness, the same dangerous sense of belonging. Neither understood how things had progressed this far. Neither intended for it to happen. Yet there they were, standing in the same room, trying very hard to behave normally, trying very hard not to reveal emotions neither was ready to discuss. Unfortunately, for someone was beginning to notice. Someone who knew both of them better than almost anyone else. Someone who had started observing the lingering glances, the subtle smiles, the unusual tension, and that someone was Olivia. At first, she dismissed the thought immediately. The idea seemed impossible, ridiculous even. But once the possibility entered her mind, she found herself paying closer attention. And the more she observed, the more questions she began asking herself. Questions that would soon lead her toward a discovery neither Benjamin nor Madison was prepared for. Because within the next few weeks, one unexpected conversation would force both of them to confront feelings they could no longer hide. And once those feelings were spoken aloud, there would be no turning back. The first person to notice a change was not Benjamin. It was not Madison. It was Olivia. At first, the feeling came and went so quickly that she barely paid attention to it. There would be small moments, tiny details, the kind of things most people would overlook. She would walk into a room and find her father and Madison suddenly ending a conversation. She would catch them smiling at each other before either realized she was watching. Sometimes she would mention Madison's name and her father would appear more interested than the situation required. None of those things seemed important on their own, but together they created a question Olivia could not quite answer. The strange part was that she wasn't upset. She was curious. For years, she had practically begged her father to open his heart again. She had introduced him to countless women. Some were successful business owners. Some were doctors. Some were lawyers. Others came from respected families. Every single attempt ended the same way. Benjamin Harper would smile politely, thank them for their time, and move on. Nothing ever changed. Until Madison. That was what kept bothering Olivia. Madison was different. Her father laughed more when Madison was around. He stayed at the dinner table longer. He seemed lighter somehow, happier. The realization stayed with Olivia throughout the following week. Then, something happened that pushed her suspicions even further. One afternoon, she stopped by her father's office unexpectedly. Benjamin had spent years building one of the most successful companies in the region, and Olivia occasionally visited to discuss family matters or upcoming charity projects. When she entered his office that day, She noticed something unusual immediately. Her father was smiling at his phone, not reading business reports, not answering emails, smiling. Olivia froze. Benjamin quickly placed the phone face down on his desk. A second later, his expression returned to normal, but it was too late. She had seen it. "Who was that?" Olivia asked casually. Benjamin looked up. "What? The person who made you smile?" "No, no one." The answer came too quickly. Olivia narrowed her eyes. "No one?" Benjamin shrugged. "Just something I read." Olivia stared at him. Benjamin stared back. Neither spoke. Then Olivia laughed. Benjamin laughed too. The tension disappeared. But the question remained, because Olivia knew her father. And she knew when he wasn't telling her everything. Meanwhile, across town, Madison was fighting a battle she seemed destined to lose. The distance she had tried creating had failed. The logic she kept repeating to herself was losing power. Every reason she had for staying away was slowly being overwhelmed by something stronger: her feelings. The situation became even more complicated after she began receiving occasional messages from Benjamin. Nothing inappropriate, nothing romantic, nothing anyone could question. Simple conversations, questions about work, recommendations for books, discussions about travel, comments about projects she was working on. The messages appeared harmless. Yet Madison found herself waiting for them, looking forward to them, reading them more than once. And every time her phone lit up with Benjamin's name, her heart reacted before her mind could stop it. She hated that, and she loved it, both at the same time. One evening, she sat alone in her apartment, staring at a message Benjamin had sent earlier that day. It was only one sentence. A simple question about an art exhibit she had mentioned weeks earlier. Nothing special, nothing extraordinary, yet she had read it 5 times, then 10, then 20. Finally, she placed her phone down and covered her face with her hands. Because she could no longer deny the truth. She was falling in love. The realization felt both beautiful and terrifying. Beautiful because the connection felt genuine. Terrifying because of everything standing between them. Most of all, Olivia. Her best friend deserved honesty. Her best friend deserved loyalty. And Madison wasn't sure how to give her both. Several days later, fate created another opportunity. Olivia planned a weekend getaway with co-workers and would be away until Sunday evening. Before leaving, she asked Madison to stop by the house and check on a charity event proposal she had left behind. It seemed like a simple request. Madison agreed without hesitation. Only later did she realize Benjamin would be home. The entire drive there felt different. Her heart raced. Her thoughts refused to settle. Part of her considered turning around. Part of her knew she wouldn't. When she arrived, Benjamin greeted her at the door. For a moment, neither moved, neither spoke. The silence felt strangely familiar now, comfortable, dangerous. "Olivia said you'd be stopping by," Benjamin said. Madison smiled. "She told me you'd probably be working." Benjamin stepped aside. "Come in." The next few hours passed faster than either expected. They reviewed documents, discussed charity plans, talked about future projects. But eventually those topics disappeared. The conversation became personal again, as it always seemed to. Benjamin spoke about losing his wife. Not the public version of the story everyone knew. The real version, the lonely version, the painful version. For years, he had kept those emotions buried beneath responsibilities and expectations. Yet with Madison, the words came easily. Madison listened quietly, not interrupting, not judging, simply understanding. And for Benjamin, that understanding meant everything. At one point, he stopped speaking and looked directly at her. The room grew quiet. Neither seemed eager to break the silence. Then Benjamin said something that changed everything. I haven't talked to anyone like this in years. Madison's breath caught. The honesty in his voice surprised her. Benjamin continued looking at her, waiting, almost as though he expected her to say something important, something life-changing. Instead, Madison whispered the only truth she could manage. I know. Benjamin's gaze never left hers, neither moved. Neither looked away, and for one brief moment, the world outside that room seemed to disappear completely. Then a phone rang. The spell broke instantly. Reality returned. Madison stepped back. Benjamin looked away. The moment was gone, but neither would forget it. That evening, after Madison left, Benjamin remained seated in the same chair long after she was gone. The truth had finally become impossible to ignore. This wasn't admiration, it wasn't curiosity, and it certainly wasn't friendship. He was falling in love. The realization should have brought clarity. Instead, it brought conflict. Because for all the emotions growing between them, one obstacle remained. Olivia. Benjamin loved his daughter more than anything in the world. The thought of hurting her was unbearable. What if she felt betrayed? What if she believed her trust had been broken? What if their relationship damaged the friendship she valued most? Those questions followed him deep into the night. Yet somewhere inside him, another question had begun demanding attention. What if he walked away? What if he spent the rest of his life wondering what could have been? The following morning brought no answers, only more uncertainty. And while Benjamin wrestled with his emotions, Olivia was about to discover something that would confirm every suspicion she had been hiding. A discovery so unexpected that it would force her to see her father and her best friend in an entirely new way. Because in just a few days, Olivia would accidentally witness a moment neither of them knew anyone had seen. And from that moment forward, nothing would ever be the same again. For the next several days, Olivia could not shake the feeling that something important was happening right in front of her. Every instinct told her she was missing a piece of a puzzle. Not a dangerous puzzle, not a troubling one, just a mystery she had somehow become part of without realizing it. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became that the answer involved two people she loved deeply, her father and Madison. What she didn't know was that both of them were fighting the same battle: distance, reason, self-control. Neither wanted to cross a line that could hurt Olivia. Neither wanted to risk destroying a relationship that mattered so much. Yet, every attempt to pull away only seemed to make their connection stronger. A week later, Olivia invited Madison to accompany her to a charity gala being hosted by one of the city's most influential families. Benjamin was attending as well. The event itself was elegant. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom. Conversations echoed throughout the room. Music played softly in the background. Everything appeared perfectly normal, until Olivia noticed something. She was speaking with a group of guests when she happened to glance across the room. Benjamin was standing near one of the large windows. Madison was speaking with several people nearby. Nothing unusual, nothing inappropriate. Yet the moment Madison laughed at something someone said, Benjamin looked in her direction, and the expression on his face stopped Olivia cold. It wasn't the look of a businessman. It wasn't the look of a family friend. It was something else, something warmer, something deeper. Olivia found herself staring. Then, almost as if sensing her attention, Benjamin looked away. A few minutes later, Madison crossed the ballroom to speak with another group of guests. Benjamin's eyes followed her, only for a second. But it happened, Olivia saw it, and suddenly, every strange moment from the past few months came rushing back. The smiles, the conversations, the awkward silences, the lingering looks, the change in her father's behavior. Everything began fitting together. The realization should have shocked her. Instead, it left her speechless. Not because she was angry, because she wasn't. She was trying to understand why neither of them had said anything. The answer came sooner than she expected. The following weekend, Olivia stopped by Madison's apartment without warning. The two women had always been comfortable, showing up unannounced. Their friendship had never required formal invitations. When Madison opened the door, she looked surprised and nervous, a reaction Olivia noticed immediately. "Everything okay?" Olivia asked. "Of course." The answer sounded forced. Olivia stepped inside. Madison offered her coffee. They sat together, talked about work, talked about life, talked about everything, except the one subject hanging between them. Eventually, Olivia decided she had waited long enough. She set her coffee cup down, looked directly at her friend, and asked a question Madison never saw coming. "Are you in love with someone?" The color drained from Madison's face. For a brief moment, she forgot how to breathe. Olivia noticed every second of it. Madison tried to smile, tried to recover, tried to think of an answer. Nothing came. The silence said more than words ever could. Olivia watched her carefully, then spoke again. "Who is he?" Madison looked away. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain Olivia could hear it. This was the moment she had feared, the moment she had spent weeks trying to avoid. And yet she still wasn't prepared for it. "Olivia," Madison began softly, then stopped. Olivia's expression changed, not angry, not upset, just curious, waiting, trying to understand. Madison wanted to tell her everything. She wanted to explain how it happened, how she never planned it, how she fought against it, how she tried creating distance, how every attempt failed. But the words wouldn't come. The risk felt too great, the fear too strong. So instead, she said the only thing she could. "I don't know what to do." Olivia stared at her. That answer alone confirmed everything. Someone had captured Madison's heart. Someone important, someone complicated. But who? The mystery followed Olivia for days. Then fate finally provided the answer. A few evenings later, Olivia returned home earlier than expected. She had cancelled a meeting and decided to spend the rest of the day with her father. When she entered the house, she noticed Benjamin wasn't in his office. He wasn't in the library either. One of the staff members casually mentioned he was out in the garden. Olivia headed outside. As she approached, she heard voices, two voices, Benjamin's and Madison's. She stopped walking, not intentionally. The sound of their conversation simply caught her attention. Neither realized she was nearby. Neither realized she could hear them. They were seated beneath a large oak tree at the far end of the garden, talking quietly, comfortably, like two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Olivia watched for a moment, then another. Nothing inappropriate happened. No dramatic declarations, no shocking confessions, just a conversation. Yet what struck her wasn't what they said. It was how they looked at each other. The warmth, the affection, the connection. There was no denying it now. Her best friend and her father were in love. The realization settled over her slowly. She expected anger. It never came. She expected betrayal. That never came either. Instead, she felt something completely different. Relief. Because for the first time in years, her father looked alive. Truly alive. The loneliness she had watched him carry for so long seemed lighter. The sadness she thought would never leave him had begun fading. And Madison looked happy too. Genuinely happy. As Olivia stood there watching, she suddenly understood something neither of them realized. They were both terrified of her reaction. That was why they were hiding. That was why neither had spoken. They weren't protecting themselves. They were protecting her. The realization touched her deeply. Quietly, Olivia turned around and walked back toward the house. But before either of them noticed her presence, she never interrupted, never announced herself, never revealed what she had seen. Instead, she spent the rest of the evening thinking, remembering, reflecting, and by the time night arrived, she had made a decision. A decision that would surprise both Benjamin and Madison, because she wasn't planning to stop their relationship. She wasn't planning to confront them. She wasn't planning to create distance. Instead, she intended to do something neither of them would ever expect. She was going to help them. But before she could do that, another problem was about to emerge. A problem neither Benjamin nor Madison saw coming, because while they were busy worrying about Olivia's reaction, a secret from Madison's past was quietly making its way back into her life. And when that secret finally appeared, it would threaten everything they had worked so hard to protect. The strange thing about secrets is that they often feel safest right before they are discovered. For weeks, Benjamin Harper and Madison Reed had convinced themselves they were protecting Olivia by keeping their feelings hidden. They believed silence was the responsible choice. They believed waiting would somehow make the situation easier. What neither of them realized was that Olivia already knew, and unlike the reaction they feared, Olivia was carrying a smile she struggled to hide. She had spent years wishing for exactly this outcome. The only difference was that she never imagined Madison would be the woman who finally reached her father's heart. For several days, Olivia kept her discovery to herself. She watched, she listened, she paid attention, and the more she observed, the more convinced she became that their feelings were genuine. There was no manipulation, no game, no hidden agenda, just two people who cared deeply for one another and were too afraid of hurting her to admit it. That realization made Olivia love them both even more. Meanwhile, Benjamin and Madison were growing increasingly miserable. Not because anything was wrong between them, quite the opposite. The connection between them had become impossible to ignore. And that was exactly the problem. The stronger their feelings became, the harder it was to pretend nothing was happening. Benjamin found himself looking forward to every message from Madison, every phone call, every conversation, every visit. For a man who had spent years convinced he would never love again, the experience felt both wonderful and unsettling. He had forgotten what anticipation felt like, forgotten what hope felt like, forgotten what it meant to imagine a future with someone. Madison was experiencing the same emotions. She would wake up thinking about him, go through her day thinking about him, and often fall asleep wondering whether he was thinking about her too. The answer, of course, was yes, far more than either of them wanted to admit. One afternoon, nearly 2 months after their first meeting, Benjamin received a call from Madison. The sound of her voice immediately told him something was wrong. She sounded distracted, unusually quiet, concerned. Benjamin noticed it within seconds. "Is everything okay?" he asked. A brief silence followed. Then Madison answered, "I think so." The uncertainty in her voice only deepened his concern. Benjamin stood from his desk and closed the office door. "What happened?" Madison hesitated. For several moments, she seemed unsure whether she should continue. Then she finally spoke. "There is someone from my past who has started contacting me again." Benjamin felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. Not jealousy, not yet. Something closer to concern. "Someone important?" Another pause. "No." The answer came quickly, firmly, without hesitation. Benjamin immediately noticed. Whoever this person was, Madison clearly wanted no connection with him. "What does he want?" Benjamin asked. "I don't know." Madison sighed softly. "I haven't spoken to him in years." The conversation continued for several minutes. Madison revealed very little, only that the individual had once been part of her life and had recently begun attempting to reconnect. Benjamin respected her privacy. He didn't push further, but after ending the call, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was bothering her more deeply than she was willing to admit. The following week confirmed his suspicion. Madison became distant, not from Benjamin, not emotionally, but mentally. She seemed distracted, lost in thought, preoccupied. Olivia noticed it too, and because Olivia already knew far more than either of them realized, she immediately became concerned. One evening she invited Madison over for dinner. The moment her friend arrived, Olivia knew something was wrong. Madison smiled. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. She laughed, but the laughter sounded forced. For someone who knew her as well as Olivia did, the difference was impossible to miss. After dinner, Olivia finally asked, "What aren't you telling me?" Madison looked up, surprised. Olivia continued, "You haven't been yourself lately." Madison tried dismissing the concern. Olivia refused to accept the explanation. Eventually, Madison admitted someone from her past had resurfaced. Olivia listened carefully. The more Madison spoke, the more protective Olivia became. Not because she feared this mystery man, because she feared the effect he was having on her friend. By the end of the conversation, Olivia had made another decision. If someone was causing Madison distress, she intended to find out why. Unfortunately, events began moving faster than any of them expected. 3 days later, Madison attended a professional networking event for designers and business owners. The evening started normally. She greeted clients, spoke with colleagues, discussed upcoming projects. Everything seemed routine until she saw him, standing on the opposite side of the room, watching her, the man she had hoped never to see again. For a moment, Madison froze. Her stomach tightened, her pulse quickened, not because she still cared about him, because she remembered exactly why she had walked away. He approached slowly, confidently, as though years had never passed, as though he had every right to be there. Madison remained polite, professional, calm, at least on the surface. Inside, she wanted the conversation to end as quickly as possible. The man attempted casual conversation, asked questions, made jokes, pretended they were old friends reconnecting after a long absence. Madison answered briefly, keeping her distance, maintaining boundaries. Eventually, she excused herself and left. The encounter lasted less than 10 minutes, yet it ruined her entire evening. Because it reopened memories she had worked very hard to leave behind. When she arrived home, she found herself thinking not about the man she had just seen, but about Benjamin, his kindness, his patience, his honesty. The contrast between the two men could not have been greater. For the first time, Madison realized something important. She wasn't merely attracted to Benjamin. She trusted him completely. That realization changed everything. Because attraction can fade. Excitement can fade. Even chemistry can fade. Trust is different. Trust creates foundations. And somewhere along the way, Benjamin Harper had become the safest place in her life. The next morning, Olivia received a surprising invitation. Her father wanted to have lunch with her. Alone. The request immediately caught her attention. Benjamin rarely scheduled private lunches unless something important was on his mind. As Olivia drove to the restaurant, she found herself wondering what he wanted to discuss. Business? Family matters? Future plans? The truth never crossed her mind. Because sitting on the other side of the table, Benjamin Harper had finally reached a point where silence was no longer possible. He had spent months fighting his feelings, months questioning himself, months worrying about Olivia, and now he was preparing to do something he never thought he would do again. Confess that he was in love. What Benjamin didn't know was that Olivia already had the answer. What Olivia didn't know was that her response would change his life forever, and before that lunch ended, one conversation would set into motion a chain of events that would bring every secret into the open. Benjamin arrived at the restaurant nearly 20 minutes early. That alone would have surprised anyone who knew him. He was a man who valued punctuality, but arriving that far ahead of schedule was unusual even for him. As he sat alone at the corner table, he found himself rehearsing the same conversation repeatedly. Different words, different approaches, different explanations. None of them felt right. For months he had carried a growing fear, not fear of rejection, not fear of embarrassment, fear of disappointing Olivia. Everything else in his life was secondary to that. His business, his reputation, his success, none of it mattered more than his daughter. If Olivia felt hurt, nothing else would matter. When she finally arrived, Benjamin immediately noticed the smile on her face. She seemed relaxed, happy, completely unaware of the emotional storm he was experiencing. At least, that was what he believed. The lunch began normally. They discussed work, family, upcoming events, friends. Neither mentioned the real reason for the meeting. Not immediately. Several times Benjamin tried steering the conversation toward the subject. Several times he lost his nerve, Olivia noticed. By the time their meals arrived, she was almost certain she knew what was happening. Her father looked exactly like someone preparing to reveal an important secret. Finally, Benjamin placed his fork down and took a slow breath. Olivia. The seriousness in his voice immediately caught her attention. She looked up. Benjamin held her gaze. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he finally said the words he had been carrying for months. "I need to tell you something." Olivia smiled softly. "I know." Benjamin blinked. The response completely caught him off guard. "You know?" Olivia nodded. Benjamin stared at her in confusion. For several seconds, he genuinely didn't understand. Then, realization slowly began appearing on his face. Olivia couldn't hold back her smile any longer. "You've been in love with Madison for months." The silence that followed was almost comical. Benjamin looked stunned, absolutely stunned. For one of the few times in his life, she seemed completely speechless. "You knew?" he finally asked. Olivia laughed. "Dad, everyone might not know, but I definitely know." Benjamin leaned back in his chair. Part of him felt relieved. Another part felt slightly embarrassed. He had spent months worrying about a conversation that apparently wasn't even necessary. "What gave it away?" he asked. Olivia smiled. "Everything." Benjamin shook his head. "That doesn't answer the question." "It answers it perfectly." For the first time that afternoon, Benjamin laughed. A genuine laugh. The kind that had become increasingly common since Madison entered his life. Then his expression became serious again. "Are you upset?" The question carried genuine concern. Olivia saw it immediately. Benjamin wasn't asking out of obligation. He truly needed to know. The answer came without hesitation. No. Benjamin remained silent. Olivia continued. "I'm happy." The words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment he simply looked at her, trying to process what he was hearing, trying to accept it, trying to believe it. Then Olivia reached across the table and placed her hand over his. The same way her mother used to. The gesture nearly broke him. "You deserve to be happy," she said quietly. "Dad, you've spent years taking care of everyone else." Benjamin swallowed hard. Olivia continued. "I loved Mum too." The mention of his late wife brought a familiar sadness. Not overwhelming, just present. A memory that never completely disappeared. Olivia smiled gently. "And If she could see you now, I think she'd want you to live again." Benjamin lowered his eyes briefly. The emotion in his chest became difficult to hide. For years he had convinced himself moving forward somehow meant leaving the past behind. Madison had slowly taught him that wasn't true, and now Olivia was telling him the same thing. A few moments later, Benjamin asked the question he had feared most. What if people judge her? Olivia immediately understood. He wasn't worried about himself. He was worried about Madison. The age difference, the attention, the opinions, the assumptions people might make. Olivia shook her head. People always have opinions. Benjamin remained quiet. "I know Madison," Olivia continued. "She's not with you because of money. She's not with you because of status. She's with you because she loves you." The certainty in her voice surprised him. Then Olivia smiled. "And honestly, you're completely in love with her too." Benjamin laughed despite himself. There was no point denying it anymore. Not now. Not after everything. The lunch lasted another hour. By the time it ended, Benjamin felt lighter than he had in years. The burden he had carried for months was finally gone. As they left the restaurant, Olivia hugged him tightly. "You should tell her." Benjamin looked down at her. "Tell her what?" Olivia rolled her eyes dramatically. "The thing you've clearly been trying to tell her for weeks." Benjamin laughed again. Then something remarkable happened. For the first time since losing his wife, he allowed himself to imagine a future. Not a business plan, not a financial goal, a future with someone. A future with Madison. Meanwhile, across town, Madison was completely unaware of the conversation that had just taken place. She was focused on work, trying to distract herself, trying not to think about Benjamin, trying and failing. Every few minutes her thoughts returned to him. The lunch meeting, the uncertainty, the possibility that everything might finally change. What she didn't know was that Olivia was driving straight toward her apartment, and Olivia had absolutely no intention of keeping any secrets. Less than an hour later, Madison opened her front door and found Olivia standing there. The expression on Olivia's face immediately made her nervous. "Why do you look like that?" Madison asked. Olivia walked inside, still smiling. Still carrying an energy Madison couldn't quite understand. Then she delivered a sentence that made Madison's heart nearly stop. "My father loves you." Madison froze, completely. Every thought vanished, every word disappeared. The room suddenly felt very small. Olivia watched her carefully, then added another sentence. "And before you panic, yes, I already know everything." The silence stretched between them. Madison couldn't move, couldn't think. Couldn't even decide which part of that statement shocked her most. The fact that Benjamin loved her, or the fact that Olivia knew. What happened next would become one of the most emotional conversations of their lives. Because for the first time, there would be no more hiding, no more pretending, no more fear, only truth. And before the day was over, Madison would finally reveal something she had been keeping hidden from both of them. A truth connected to the man who had recently returned from her past. A truth that would place her future with Benjamin in unexpected jeopardy. And once that secret was revealed, all three of them would be forced to make a choice that could either bring them closer together or pull them apart forever. For several long seconds after Olivia spoke, Madison simply stood there staring at her. She wasn't sure which emotion she was feeling. Relief, shock, happiness, fear. All of them seemed to arrive at once. The room felt strangely quiet, almost unreal. For months she had imagined this conversation ending in disaster. She had imagined tears, arguments, accusations. The end of a friendship that meant everything to her. Instead, Olivia was standing in her living room smiling. Actually smiling. Madison slowly sank onto the couch, still trying to process everything she had just heard. "You aren't angry?" she finally asked. Olivia looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Why would I be angry?" Madison laughed softly, not because anything was funny. Because she suddenly felt emotional. "Olivia, I'm your best friend, and he's your father." Olivia nodded. "Exactly." Madison blinked. "Exactly, yes." Olivia sat beside her. "If my father was falling in love with someone who didn't care about him, I'd have a problem." Madison remained silent. "If my best friend was falling in love with someone who treated her badly, I'd have a problem." Olivia smiled warmly. "But that's not what's happening." Madison felt her eyes beginning to water. Months of fear suddenly seemed unnecessary. Months of worry, months of guilt, months of imagining the worst. Gone, just like that. Then Olivia reached over and squeezed her hand. "You make him happy." The simple statement carried enormous weight. Madison looked down, trying to hide her emotions, trying unsuccessfully. "And he makes you happy, too." The tears finally escaped. Not dramatic tears, not heartbreaking tears. The kind that arrive when a burden you've carried for too long finally disappears. For a while, neither woman spoke. Then Olivia asked the question that mattered most. "Do you love him?" Madison's answer came immediately, without hesitation, without doubt. Yes. The honesty surprised even her. For months, she had been avoiding the word, dancing around it, trying to describe her feelings without naming them. Now there was no point. She loved him, completely. The realization no longer frightened her. Instead, it felt liberating. Olivia smiled. "I knew it." Madison laughed through her tears. "You knew? I've known for weeks." Madison covered her face, partly embarrassed, partly amused, partly overwhelmed. Then Olivia's expression became more serious. "There is something else, isn't there?" Madison's smile faded instantly. The shift was subtle, but Olivia noticed it. The atmosphere in the room changed. And for the first time that afternoon, genuine concern appeared in Olivia's eyes. "What is it?" Madison looked away. The question she'd had been avoiding for weeks was finally standing directly in front of her. She had hoped the problem would disappear on its own. It hadn't. She had hoped she could handle it privately. That wasn't working either. Eventually, she took a slow breath. Then she told Olivia everything. About the man who had returned from her past, about the unwanted messages, the unexpected appearances, the uncomfortable encounters, the growing pressure. Olivia listened carefully. The more she heard, the more concerned she became. Not because she thought Madison was in danger, because she could see how much stress the situation was causing her. When Madison finally finished speaking, silence settled over the room. Olivia was the first to break it. "Does my father know?" Madison shook her head. "No, why not?" "I didn't want to worry him," Olivia sighed. That answer sounded exactly like something her father would say. Two people trying to protect each other. Two people carrying burdens alone. Two people making the same mistake. By the time Olivia left the apartment later that evening, she had already decided what needed to happen. Benjamin deserved to know. Not because he needed to rescue Madison. Because he deserved honesty. And because Madison shouldn't be carrying everything by herself. Unfortunately, events moved faster than anyone expected. The very next day, Madison arrived at her office to find an envelope waiting on her desk. No return address. No explanation, nothing. At first, she assumed it was work-related. A contract, a proposal, project documents. Then she opened it. Inside was a photograph, an old photograph, one she hadn't seen in years. The image immediately stole her breath, because it came from a chapter of her life she had worked very hard to leave behind. For several moments, she simply stared at it, confused, unsettled, trying to understand who had sent it. Then she noticed a note folded beneath the photograph. A short, handwritten message. Just one sentence that instantly confirmed who was behind it. Madison felt her stomach tighten, because she finally understood. The situation wasn't ending. It was escalating. That evening, she considered calling Benjamin. Several times she picked up her phone. Several times she put it back down. Part of her wanted to tell him everything. Part of her didn't want to bring unnecessary complications into his life. Eventually, she made a decision, a mistake she would later regret. She chose silence. Meanwhile, Benjamin spent the day thinking about Madison. And for the first time in years, those thoughts were accompanied by hope. The conversation with Olivia had changed everything. The obstacle he feared most no longer existed. His daughter supported them. His daughter wanted them together. The relief was impossible to describe. For months he had been standing at the edge of a decision. Now he was finally ready to move forward. That evening he drove to the same lakeside restaurant, where he and Madison had once shared a conversation that lasted hours without either noticing the time. The place had become special to him, not because of the restaurant itself, because of the memories attached to it. As he sat there overlooking the water, Benjamin made up his mind. No more waiting, no more hesitation, no more fear. He was going to tell Madison exactly how he felt. Not next month, not next week. Soon, very soon. What Benjamin didn't know was that Madison was sitting alone in her apartment at that exact moment, staring at the photograph from her past. And the decision she was making was very different. Because, after receiving that envelope, Madison had started wondering whether loving Benjamin might eventually bring complications into his life. Complications he didn't deserve. Questions he shouldn't have to answer. Problems she should solve on her own. By midnight, she had reached a heartbreaking conclusion. A conclusion that would shock Benjamin. A conclusion that would leave Olivia furious. And a conclusion that threatened to destroy the future all three of them had been moving toward. Because the following morning, Madison would make a choice that seemed selfless in her mind, but would feel devastating to the man who loved her. And once that choice was made, everything would change. The following morning, Madison Reed woke up after barely sleeping. The photograph remained on her kitchen table, exactly where she had left it. Every time she looked at it, the same feeling returned. Not fear, regret. For years she had worked hard to build a new life. A peaceful life. A stable life. A future she could be proud of. And now, just as happiness seemed within reach, the past had found its way back to her doorstep. She stood near the window with a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. Outside, the city moved as it always did. People rushed to work. Traffic flowed through the streets. Life continued normally. Yet inside her apartment, everything felt uncertain. Because Madison had convinced herself of something. She had convinced herself that loving Benjamin Harper might eventually create problems for him. Maybe people would ask questions. Maybe old stories would resurface. Maybe the situation would become more complicated than either of them deserved. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that stepping away was the right thing to do. The painful thing, the selfless thing. Unfortunately, selfless decisions often create the deepest wounds. That afternoon, Benjamin called her. The moment his name appeared on her phone, her heart reacted. As it always did. She stared at the screen, took a deep breath, then answered. His voice immediately made her smile, a smile she fought to hide. "How's your day going?" he asked. The question sounded simple, normal, but hearing it suddenly made everything harder. Because Benjamin had no idea what she was planning, no idea what was happening inside her mind. No idea she was preparing to walk away from the very thing she wanted most. The conversation lasted only a few minutes. When it ended, Madison felt worse than before. By evening, she had made her decision, and once she made it, she refused to change her mind. The next day, she asked Benjamin to meet her, alone. At a quiet cafe several miles outside the city, Benjamin agreed immediately. He actually felt excited. For the first time in months, he believed they were finally moving towards something honest, something real. As he drove to the cafe, he found himself thinking about the future. A future he had spent years refusing to imagine. A future that now seemed possible. For once, he wasn't thinking about business meetings, contracts, investments, responsibilities. He was thinking about Madison. What he wanted to tell her, how he wanted to tell her, how relieved he felt knowing Olivia supported them. For the first time in a very long time, Benjamin Harper was genuinely happy, which was why the expression on Madison's face immediately alarmed him. The moment he arrived, he knew something was wrong. She looked tired, distracted, emotionally exhausted. Benjamin sat across from her, concern replacing excitement almost instantly. "What's happened?" Madison looked down. For several seconds, she couldn't answer. Then she finally forced herself to speak. "I think we should stop this." The words landed like a physical blow. Benjamin stared at her, certain he had misunderstood. "Stop what?" Madison swallowed hard. "This, the two of us." Silence, heavy, uncomfortable, painful. Benjamin searched her face for answers. Nothing made sense. Only days earlier, everything had felt different, hopeful, promising. Now she was sitting across from him, ending something that had barely begun. "Why?" he asked quietly. Madison looked away. Because the truth was complicated, and because she didn't trust herself to explain it without breaking down. "I don't want your life becoming complicated because of me." Benjamin frowned. "My life became better because of you." The sincerity in his voice nearly shattered her resolve, but she forced herself to continue. "This is the right thing." Benjamin immediately shook his head. No, the answer came without hesitation, without uncertainty, without doubt. "No, it isn't." For the next several minutes they talked. Or rather, Benjamin tried to understand, while Madison tried to push him away. Neither succeeded, because neither truly wanted the conversation to happen. Eventually Madison stood, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." Then she left. Benjamin remained seated long after she disappeared, trying to understand what had just happened. Trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly. Trying to understand why the woman he loved looked heartbroken while walking away from him. Nothing about it made sense, and that was precisely what bothered him. Because if Madison no longer cared about him, he would have seen it. He knew her too well. This wasn't rejection, this was sacrifice, and Benjamin intended to find out why. Meanwhile, Olivia was having a very different conversation. She had arrived at Madison's apartment that evening, expecting good news. Instead, she found her best friend crying. The sight immediately triggered alarm. Within minutes, Olivia learned everything. The meeting, the separation, the decision, the reasons behind it. By the time Madison finished explaining, Olivia was furious. Not at Madison, at the situation, at the unnecessary sacrifice, at the fact that two people she loved were hurting themselves for reasons that made no sense. When Madison finally revealed the photograph and explained the recent events involving the man from her past, Olivia's expression changed. The pieces suddenly fit together. Now she understood. Madison wasn't ending things because she wanted to. She was ending them because she believed she was protecting Benjamin. The realization only made Olivia more determined. Because she knew her father. And she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Benjamin Harper would never allow someone he loved to carry a burden alone. That night, Olivia drove straight to her father's house. She found him sitting alone in his study. The room was quiet. The expression on his face said everything. Benjamin looked exactly like a man who had lost something precious. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Olivia sat down across from him. She told me what happened. Benjamin nodded slowly. His voice sounded distant when he finally answered, "I don't understand." Olivia reached into her bag, removed the photograph Madison had shown her, and placed it on the desk. Benjamin looked down. Confusion appeared immediately, then concern, then realization. As Olivia explained everything Madison had been hiding, the entire situation finally became clear. The messages, the pressure, the unwanted return of someone from her past, the fear, the sacrifice, the misguided attempt to protect him. When Olivia finished speaking, silence filled the room. Benjamin stared at the photograph, then looked toward the window. His expression changed. The sadness disappeared. Not completely, but enough. Because he finally understood something important. Madison hadn't walked away because she stopped loving him. She walked away because she loved him too much, and Benjamin Harper had absolutely no intention of letting that be the end of their story. The next decision he made would surprise both Madison and Olivia, because after months of hesitation, months of caution, and months of restraint, Benjamin was finally done standing still, and what he planned to do next would change everything. Benjamin Harper did not sleep much that night, not because he was angry, not because he was confused. For the first time in days, he actually understood exactly what had happened. Madison had not ended things because she wanted freedom. She had not ended things because she found someone else. She had not ended things because her feelings had changed. She had walked away because she believed she was protecting him. And that realization changed everything. As the sun rose the following morning, Benjamin found himself standing in front of the large portrait of his late wife that hung in a quiet part of the house. It had remained there for years, a reminder of the woman he had loved, a reminder of the life they had built together. For a long moment, he simply stood there, reflecting, remembering, grateful. Then something unexpected happened. For the first time since her passing, he no longer felt guilty about moving forward, because loving Madison did not erase the love he once shared with his wife. It simply meant his heart had found room to live again. That realization brought a sense of peace he had not felt in years. Across town, Madison's morning was very different. She woke with swollen eyes and an aching heart. The previous day's conversation replayed endlessly in her mind. Every word, every expression, every painful second. The hardest part was knowing she had hurt someone she loved. Benjamin's face when she walked away haunted her, because she knew she had broken his heart, and in doing so, she had broken her own. Several times she considered calling him. Several times she picked up her phone. Several times she put it back down. What would she even say? That she made a mistake? That she regretted everything? That she missed him already? None of those things would solve the problem she believed still existed. Meanwhile, Olivia had become increasingly frustrated. She loved her father. She loved Madison, and watching both of them suffer was becoming unbearable. For months they had hidden their feelings. Now they were hiding from their feelings. The situation seemed ridiculous, which was why Olivia decided she was done waiting for either of them to act. That afternoon, she visited her father again. Benjamin was seated on the terrace overlooking the gardens, a place he often used when he needed time to think. Olivia sat beside him. For several moments, neither spoke. Then she finally broke the silence. "What are you going to do?" Benjamin looked toward the horizon. I've been asking myself the same question. Olivia nodded. Then she said something that stayed with him. If you let her go because she's afraid, you'll both regret it. Benjamin turned toward her. Olivia continued. She made a decision for you. Benjamin remained silent, and she never gave you the chance to make your own. Those words struck him immediately, because they were true. Madison had decided what was best for him without asking what he wanted, without trusting him to face difficulties beside her. The realization strengthened something inside him. Resolve, determination, hope. For months he had been cautious, patient, careful. Now he understood that some things were worth fighting for. Not through force, not through pressure, through honesty. The following evening, Benjamin made a decision. He drove to Madison's apartment. No dramatic plan, no prepared speech, just the truth. The entire drive felt longer than usual, partly because he knew everything could change, partly because he knew everything already had. When he finally arrived, he sat in the car for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he stepped out, walked toward the building, and knocked on her door. Inside, Madison was completely unprepared. She wasn't expecting visitors. She certainly wasn't expecting him. The moment she opened the door and saw Benjamin standing there, her heart nearly stopped. Neither spoke. For several seconds, they simply looked at one another, the same way they had during that very first handshake months earlier. The same way they always seemed to. Eventually, Madison found her voice. Benjamin. He looked at her quietly. We need to talk. Madison immediately felt her emotions rising again. Part of her wanted to invite him inside. Part of her wanted to protect herself from more pain. In the end, neither option mattered, because Benjamin gently spoke before she could answer. No more running. The words landed softly, but they carried enormous weight. Madison lowered her eyes. Benjamin continued. You don't get to decide what risks I'm willing to take. Tears immediately filled her eyes, because she knew exactly what he meant. You don't get to decide what matters to me. Madison tried speaking. Nothing came out. Benjamin stepped closer. Not aggressively, not forcefully, simply close enough for honesty. I know about the photographs. Madison froze. I know about the messages. More silence. I know about everything you've been trying to handle by yourself. The tears finally escaped. Benjamin's voice softened. And I wish you had trusted me enough to tell me. That sentence hurt more than anything else. Because he was right. She should have told him. She should have trusted him. Instead, she had chosen isolation, the same mistake so many people make when they are afraid. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Madison finally whispered the truth. I was trying to protect you. Benjamin smiled sadly. I know. The tenderness in his voice almost broke her. Then he said something she would remember for the rest of her life. Madison, the best parts of my life have never come from avoiding challenges. She looked up. Benjamin held her gaze. The best parts came from the people worth facing them with. The tears flowed freely now. Not because she was sad, because she finally understood. Love wasn't about removing every obstacle. Love was about choosing who you wanted beside you when obstacles appeared. And for the first time, since this entire situation began, Madison felt the walls she had built around herself beginning to fall. What neither of them realized was that one final surprise was already waiting. A surprise neither Benjamin nor Madison saw coming. Because Olivia Harper had been planning something of her own, and before this story reached its conclusion, she was about to give both of them a moment they would never forget. A moment that would finally bring every secret, every fear, and every unanswered question to an end. For several moments after Benjamin finished speaking, neither of them moved. The world seemed to disappear around them. There was no apartment hallway, no passing time, no uncertainty. Only two people, standing face to face after months of hiding feelings they could no longer deny. Madison wiped away her tears. Benjamin smiled softly, not because everything was suddenly perfect, because for the first time they were finally being honest, completely honest. "No more secrets?" Benjamin asked. Madison laughed through her tears. "No more secrets." The answer brought a relief neither of them could describe. Months of misunderstandings, months of fear, months of imagining worst-case scenarios, all gone. Not because their problems had magically disappeared. Because they were finally facing them together. Benjamin reached for her hand. The same hand he had held during that first unforgettable introduction. The same hand that had unknowingly changed the course of his life. Madison looked down at their hands intertwined, then back at him. And for the first time since all of this began, she allowed herself to imagine a future without fear. A future where she didn't have to hide. A future where she didn't have to walk away from happiness. A future with Benjamin. Several days later, Olivia called both of them and insisted they meet her at the Harper estate. Neither received an explanation. Whenever Olivia became secretive, it usually meant she was planning something, and this time was no different. When Benjamin and Madison arrived, they immediately noticed something unusual. The gardens had been decorated. Tables had been arranged. Family friends had gathered. Several people from Benjamin's inner circle were present. Even some of Madison's closest friends had been invited. Confusion quickly spread across both of their faces. "What is happening?" Madison asked. Olivia smiled. The smile alone was enough to make Benjamin suspicious. Then Olivia stepped forward, took a microphone, and cleared her throat dramatically. The crowd laughed. Benjamin sighed. He already knew his daughter was responsible. What he didn't know was how far she had gone. Olivia looked directly at both of them. "For years," she began, "I tried convincing my father to fall in love again." The guests listened carefully. Olivia continued. "I introduced him to amazing women. Several people laughed. He rejected every single one." More laughter followed. Benjamin shook his head. Madison couldn't stop smiling. Then Olivia's expression softened. But then something happened. She looked toward Madison. "My best friend walked through our front door." The crowd grew quiet. At first, neither of them realized what was happening. Benjamin glanced toward Madison. Madison glanced toward Benjamin. Both remembered that first handshake, that first look, that first moment. Olivia smiled. "But everyone deserves a second chance at happiness." The emotion in her voice touched everyone present, including Benjamin, including Madison, including herself. Then she raised her glass. "To family." The crowd echoed the toast. "To friendship." Another toast. "And to love that finds us when we least expect it." The applause that followed seemed endless. Madison felt tears returning. This time they were tears of happiness, because in that moment she realized something extraordinary. She wasn't losing her best friend. She wasn't taking someone's place. She wasn't dividing a family. She was becoming part of one. Weeks later, life settled into a new rhythm. The tension was gone. The secrecy had disappeared. The uncertainty had faded. Benjamin seemed younger somehow, not in appearance, in spirit. The loneliness that had followed him for years was no longer there. Madison flourished as well. Her business continued growing. Her confidence returned. And the future no longer felt frightening. Even the issues from her past gradually lost their power. Because once she stopped facing them alone, they became easier to overcome. The greatest transformation, however, happened within the Harper family itself. What began as an unexpected connection evolved into something stronger, trust, support, belonging, the kind of bond that survives challenges because it is built on honesty. Several months later, as friends and family gathered once again in the gardens where so much had changed, Olivia stood watching two people she loved deeply. One was her father, a man she had spent years trying to save from loneliness. The other was her best friend, a woman she trusted with her whole heart. Seeing them together filled her with peace, because the happiness she had wished for all those years had finally arrived. Not in the way she expected, but perhaps in the way it was always meant to. And looking back, it was almost impossible to believe that everything had started with a single handshake that lasted a few seconds too long. A glance, a smile, a moment nobody understood at the time. Yet those small moments changed everything. Sometimes life works that way. The greatest chapters often begin when we least expect them. The people who change our lives often arrive without warning, and the future we spend years searching for sometimes appears in the most unexpected place. Before we end today's story, we want to hear from you. If you were Olivia, would you have accepted your best friend becoming your stepmother, or would you have struggled with the idea? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And here's a question that might surprise you. If Madison had never returned to the Harper estate after that first visit, would Benjamin have spent the rest of his life believing his story was already over, or would fate have found another way to bring them together? Tell us what you think, and if you enjoyed this emotional love story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.